Hi, I'm Ramos Anthony Viñas.
So hi, I'm Mariel Makatangay Mabubay.
Hi, I am Rimar Vergara Lucena, and we are the group reporter of the topic Global Governance.
Let's get started.
After we discuss the topic about global governance, students must have learned to identify the rules and function of the United Nations, to identify the challenges of global governance in the 21st centuries, and lastly, to explain the relevance of the state-aimed globalization. The topic global governance is tackled about discussion of various political flow, but the topic main focus is on the development and functioning of global political structures. Starting with more traditional structures such as nation-state, the discussion moves on the development of regional global political structures, processes, and of course, contemporary global governance.
Political flows. The global flows of people, especially refugees and illegal immigrants, poses a direct threat to the nation-state and its ability to control its borders. The looming crisis associated with dwindling oil and water supplies threatened to lead to riots and perhaps insurrection that could lead to the downfall of extant government. Meaning to say, the political flows is the flows of people na nagpapakita ng pananakot sa isang nation-state at sa kakayahan nito kontrolin ang kanilang borders. Inability of the nation-state to control economic flows dominated by MNCs or multinational companies, as well as the current economic and financial crisis that is sweeping the world. It's also posing a profound threat to the nation-state in Eastern Europe. Also, political flaws is the inability in the nation-state to control economic flows dominated with MNCs. Nagpapakita lamang ito ng kakayahan ng isang nation-state to control the economic flows. Also, nagpapakita din ng pinagdadaanan ng financial crisis na pinagdadaanan ng isang bansa ay isang threat sa isang nation-state. Environmental problems of all sorts, especially to those related to global warming, are very likely to be destabilizing political. Why it become environment problem destabilizing political? It is because it can cause loss of power and control because markets are affected of the environment problems. Border disease, especially malaria, TB and AIDS in Africa, pose a danger to political structure. Borderless disease can be a danger in political structure just because it can cause and country difficult to the foster growing their economy. Dahil sa malaria, TB and AIDS, victims ay pinupundahan ng government para sa kanilang medication. War is the most obvious global flaws threatening the nation-state involved, especially those on the losing side. Global inequalities, especially the profound and growing North-South split, threaten to pit poor nation against weak nation. It can affect the political flows that, as we notice, the rich nation is the most priority country than poor country. Also, rich nation is more powerful than poor nation. That can cause inequalities in terms of growing the economy. Terrorism is clearly regarded as threat by those nations against which it is waged. Cold War on terrorism in the US. Lastly, terrorism is the threat of every nation because it can cause damage and harm for everyone. It becomes a global problem because trade protection and liberalization can be threat to developing country because they are forced to compete in the same market as stronger economies. Also, maaari ito magdulot ng pagbagsak ng isang bagong lokal na industries because of trade cheap product from other country. Political structure, nation-state and the UN initiate a range of global because of political power or overuse of power as leader can cause a conflict like what happened to Robert Mugabe of Zimbabwe. Market state-sponsored violence against opposition parties supporter to have control to win more votes. that winning he overused his power that lead to have a conflict that caused mass migration. The nation state. After we know someone of the global problem, let us know the meaning of the nation state. Nation, social group linked through common descent, culture, language, and or territorial contiguity. Matutukoy natin ang isang nasyon if they have common language, history, and culture. National identity, a fluid and dynamic form of collective identity. Members of community believe that they are different from other countries. Nation identity ay isang pagkakakilanlan ng bansa using their language, culture, and history. Naniniwala na ang mga bansa ay magkakaiba sa pamamagitan ng national identity. Nationalism. It is doctrine and political movement that seek to make the nation basis of a political structure, especially a state. It tends to promote the interests of a particular nation as a group of people that wants to gain and maintain the nation sovereignty. State. Organizational structure outside other socio-economic with relative autonomous office holders. It is form of human association that distinguished from other social group by its purpose. Also, it is the territory with own institution and population. Nation. State integrates groups that define themselves as a nation with the organizational structure of the state. It is the political unit that state and nation are congruent. Nation state. Now, after we know the meaning of nation, state, and nation state, let us know the threats to the nation state. Threat to the nation state. The nation state is especially threatened by the global economy and global economic flows. In terms of global economy, nation-states have become little more than bit actors. It refers to the borderless global economy that nation-states are unable to control. Dahil sa borders, global economy maaari itong maging threat dahil sa madali makapasok ang mga export products na magkakos ng pagbagsak ng isang ekonomiya ng isang nation-state dahil sa more cheaper product na pwedeng maibenta sa loob ng bansa. State is linked to the technological and financial change as well as to the accelerated integration of the nation economies into one single global market economy. While nation-state once controlled markets, its other factors threatening the autonomy of the nation-state, including flows of information, illegal immigrants, new social movements, terrorists, criminals, drugs, money include laundry money and other financial instruments, sex trafficking and much else. Many of these flows have been made possible by the development and continual refinement of technologies of all sorts. The nation-state has become increasingly porous. While this seems to be supported by great deal of evidence, the fact is that no nation-state has ever been able to control its borders completely.
Human rights. Based in Turner 1993 entitled Of Individual to Life, Security and Well-Being has emerged as a major global political issue. Why does it become a global political issue? It is because these rights are universal that the nation-state cannot abrogate them. As a result of human rights group, they claim that the right to be able to have say about what is done to people within or between illegal trafficking in human sovereign state. Based on Levy and Schneider 2006, they believe that human rights are global matter and not exclusively a concern of the state. It is saying that because of that universal right, any state cannot abrogate that implication. For example, when state violates human rights or when violation occurs within the state border, the state does not take adequate action or deal with that violation. Simple as hindi gagalaw or hindi magtitake ng action yung isang country because of that implication. Declaration of Human Rights. According to the Article 13, everyone has the right to freedom of movement and residence with the borders of each country. Meaning to say na we as a Filipino o we as a human, meron tayong freedom na mag-move to other country at tumira dun sa other country na yon. It is based on Article number 13 of the Declaration of Human Rights. Secondly, everyone has the right to leave any country including his own and to return his own country. Meaning to say that we have the right na umalis, we have the right na lumipat, we have the right na bumalik dun sa sarili nating country. And it is according to the Article number 13 of Declaration of Human Rights. It is clear that the Declaration and Article take precedence over nation state. That is why UN seeking to control over the state, at least at this issue. United Nations, in spite of its myriad problems, it is the primary global organization in the realm of politics. United Nations is the intergovernmental organization that aims to maintain international peace, security, develop friendly relations among nations, achieving international cooperation, and be a center of harmonizing the action of the nation. It is the largest and most familiar international organization. Rules and function of the United Nations. It is stand in opposition, at least in general, to those who argue that globalization has brought about or bringing about a demise of the nation state. The United Nations is a global setting or pangkalahatan which nation state met and deliberate. However, United Nations is not merely a setting in which a nation state met. United Nations is also an independent actor. The two best known state-based organs in the United Nations are the Security Council, which UN's main deliberate body, and the General Assembly that is responsible for the maintenance of international peace and security. The United Nations four broad areas. Number one is the military issue. The United envisioned a major force in managing peace and security, especially in interstate relation. Ngunit dahil nga sa naganap na Cold War I na marginalized ang pag-control ng United Nations sa mga military issue. It is just because of the Security Council or dahil na nga rin sa Security Council ng US and Soviet Union kaya na-marginalized yung pag-control ng United Nations sa military issue. Pagkatapos nga ng World War I, United Nations turning the military rule in 1991 that authorized by Security Council. Kaya naman nagamit nila yung force to deal with Iraq invasion to Kuwait. In 1990s, UN engaged a wide variety of action but it is not anticipated by the founder. Because of that, founder being regarded previously as the province of state and it is include intervention in civil wars in less developing countries, election and human rights monitoring, disarmament, and even the assumption of state function. However, United Nations expansionism areas has tempered by the failures in 1990s in Slovenia and Yugoslavia. In military realm, it is also important to mention the facts that United Nations has actively involved arms control and disarmament. Number 2 is the economic issues. United Nations promotes action would lead to reduce or reduction in global inequalities. Meaning to say that United Nations is also involved the reduction of global inequality. Number 3 is the environmental issues. United Nations handle the problem about environmental issues like pollution, hazardous waste, etc. within primarily through the United Nations Environmental Programming that handle in that situation. In environmental issue, meron silang taga-handle about that. It is the United Nations Environmental Programming. Lastly, human protection. United Nations sponsored human rights treaties and agreements have protected human rights around the world. Meaning to say that United Nations not only cope military issue, economic issue, environmental issue, but also about human protection around the world. Meaning to say that United Nations has a large or broad areas to handle. The relevance of state aims globalization. Because of globalization, nation-state faces a lot of changes that are led to lose the control over economic flows and transnational companies. Although the rule of the nation-state has declined, it is still important political structure. The global age, the prosperity of the nation-state, increasingly global flows through it. Global flow should be the focal concern. Based on Benedict Anderson imagined community, it is important idea in thinking about a nation-state as a result of development of print capitalism. It is caused to conceive of actively constructed socially and politically by the people who identify the community that is represented in nation-state. In that concept, it is extended further by examining how nation-state transcend its geographical boundaries in the face of rapidly developing technologies and also increasing immigration flow, as an emphasis placed on that reimagining of the nation-state in the light of such global flow. Changing geopolitical scenario. World can be seen as evolving through three stages: the bipolar that happens during the Cold War, next will be the unipolar or incendiary of the US, and lastly to a tripolar or future with the US, EU, and China as the three center of power. Also examined is the emergence of the United Nations as well as more specific organizations such as UNICTAD, UNESCO, and IAEA.
Now let's discuss the global governance. So what is a global governance? Let's first define the meaning. Global governance is a movement towards political integration of transnational actors aimed at negotiating responses to problems that affect more than one state or region. It tends to involve institutionalization. So ang global governance ay pamamahala sa mundo or pandaigdigang pamamahala. Ito ay isang kilusan na naglalayo sa pagresolba ng mga problemang nakakaapekto sa isang estado, bansa o rehiyon. The question is, kung may global governance, iba dapat meron din tayong tinatawag na global president, global vice president, at iba pang taong mamumuno sa mundo. Imagine kung meron tayong ganyan, what do you think will happen to our world? Ano sa tingin niyo yung mangyayari? So, in my own opinion, I think mas lalong magkakagulo kasi maraming bansa makikipag-agawan sa global president position at sa iba pang mga global position. Imagine kung isa ka sa taong namumuno sa mundo, you will be an influential and powerful person, di ba? E dito pa nga lang sa country natin, ang daming gustong tumakbo sa president in the next election. And a lot of people have their opinions. So halimbawa, now we are living here in Philippine country, tapos Pilipino yung naging president of the world. Diba, as a Filipino citizen, that will be an advantage to us. Kasi mas makikilala yung bansa natin, and at the same time, it will be a way para mas lalong umunlad yung ekonomiya ng bansa natin. But that's only my opinion. Pero since walang president of the world and etc., the global governance has an institution at sila yung gumagawa ng mga policy at kasunduan para sa mga bansa. So, the first one is the United Nations, followed by the International Criminal Court, the World Bank, at marami pang iba. They tend to have limited or demarcated power to enforce compliance. The modern question of the world governance exists in the context of globalization and globalizing regimes of power sa politika, ekonomiya, at kultural. In response to acceleration of interdependence on a worldwide scale, both between human societies and between humankind and the biosphere. So, ang terminong pandaigdigang pamamahala o pamamahala sa mundo ay maaari din gamitin upang pangalanan ang proseso ng pagtatalaga ng batas, tuntunin o regulasyong inilaan para sa isang global scale. Now, move on to the new forms of governance. So, may mga bagong anyo ang global governance. The first is governance without government, Rusinao and Chimpiel 1992. Governance without government management. So, halimbawa, may mga bansa na mayroong usapin, at yung mga usapin na yun ay papamahalaan lang or lulutasin lang sa loob ng kanilang bansa. At hindi sila pwedeng pakialaman ng pamahalaan ng ibang estado. So, malaya sila na pamahalaan ng kanilang sariling bansa. The second one is governance through various public policy network. So, ito ay ang pamamahala sa pamamagitan ng iba't ibang network ng pampublikong patakaran. Sa pandaigdigang antas, kinakasangkutan nito ang pamahalaan ng iba't ibang international na institusyon, as well as the INGOs, or International Non-Governmental Organization, at mga organisasyon ng pribadong sektor ng iba't ibang uri. And last but not the least, finally, governance at the global level can be normatively mediated and moderated. So, ang pamamahala sa pandaigdigang antas ay maaaring ipamagitan sa pamantayan at tagapamagitan. Included here are efforts driven by values including the Commission on Global Governance, as well as the Global Compact created by former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan. Now, let's move on to the challenges of global governance in the 21st century. The increasing free migration of the global order. Sinasalimin nito ang pagtaas ng global na pagkakaiba-iba, as well as the array of contradictory forces that have been unleashed as a result. So, contradictory forces, ibig sabihin magkasalungat na puwersa. So, among those contradictory forces are globalization and localization, centralization and decentralization, and integration and fragmentation. The next challenge of global governance in the 21st century is the declining power of nation-state. Kung ang mga estado mismo ay hindi ganong kayang hawakan ng iba't ibang mga responsibilidad, nandyan ang global governance at silang gumagawa ng paraan para punan ang kawalan ng isang estado. The vast flow of all sort of things that run into and open right through the borders of nation-state. This could involve the flow of digital information of all sort through the internet. So kung nahihirapan or imposible para sa isang bansang estado na itigil ang ganitong daloy, magiging pampolitika ang naturang aksyon at magdudulot ng maraming negatibong reaksyon sa bansang estado. For example, China's periodic efforts to interfere with the internet have brought great condemnation both internally and externally. The mass migration of people and their entry often illegally into various nation-state. So, ito ang malawakang paglipat ng mga tao sa iba't ibang bansang estado at ang kanilang pagpasok ay kadalasang iligal. Kung hindi ito makontrol ng mga estado, nandyan ang global governance upang tumulong sa pagresolba ng problema. The flow of criminal element as well as their products, like drugs, laundered money, those bought and sold in sex trafficking at marami pang iba, is a strong factor in the call for global governance. Horrendous events within nation state that state themselves either foment and carry out or unable to control. For example, in Darfur, Sudan, perhaps hundreds of thousands have been killed and millions of people displaced, and the lives of many more disrupted in a conflict that dates to early 2003. So ito yung mga kakilakilabot na pangyayari sa loob ng bansa. Nagsasaad na ang mga estado mismo ay nagbubunsod na hindi kayang kontrolin ito. Then there are global problems that single nation state cannot hope to tackle on their own. One, of course, is the global financial crisis and panics, including the current one, that sweep the world periodically and which nations are often unable to deal with on their own. Indeed, some nations, example, the nation-state of Southeast Asia, have often been and are being victimized by such crises. Unable to help themselves, such nations are in need of a system from some type of global governance. So may mga pandaigdigang problema na hindi inaasahan sa isang bansang estado na matugunan. Kaya may roong global governance at sila ang tumutulong sa mga bansang nakararanas ng mga ganitong problema. Now, let's talk about International Non-Governmental Organization or INGOs. International Not-for-Profit Organization, performing public function but not established or run by nation-state. So, ang INGOs ay hindi itinatag or pinamamahalaan ng bansang estado. Ito ay organisasyon na hindi itinatag para kumita. layunin nito na tumulong sa publiko or gumaganap sila ng mga pampublikong tungkulin. The first modern INGOs are traceable to the 19th century. The International Red Cross was founded in Switzerland in 1865, but they have boomed in recent years. So, ang mga unang modernong INGO ay masusubaybayan noong ika-19 na siglo. Turning point in the history of INGO occurred in 1992 when a treaty to control the emission of greenhouse gases was signed as the result of the action of a variety of groups that not only exerted external pressure but were actually involved in decision-making process. Noong 1992, nabago ang kasaysayan ng INGOs. Now, let's move on to the negative side to the growth of INGOs and civil society. Fundamentally, INGOs are special interest groups and therefore, they may not take into consideration wider set of concern and issue. Ang INGO ay may espesyal na layunin. So, hindi nila maaaring isalang-alang ang mas malawak na hanay ng mga alalahanin at issue. In addition, they are not democratic. Hindi sila demokratiko. Often keep their agenda secret and are not accountable to anyone other than their members. So, miyembro lang ng INGO ang pwedeng makakita or makaalam ng kanilang agenda. They are elitist. Many involve better off and well-educated people from North. That is, undemocratic organization that seek to impose inappropriate universal plans on local organization and setting. Thus, they have the potential to be loose cannons on the global stage. They are seen as annoying busybodies that are forever putting their noses in the business of others. Thomas 2007-84-102. They often pander to public opinion and posture for the media both to attract attention to their issues and maintain or expand their power and membership. Para mapatatili or mapalawak ang kanilang kapangyarihan at pagiging kasapi, madalas silang naghahangad ng opinyon ng publiko para sa media at maakit ang atensyon sa kanilang mga issue. As a result, they may distort the magnitude of certain problem. Example, overestimating the effects and misjudging the causes of an oil spill upang isulong ang kanilang layunin at interes. Their focus on one issue may adversely affect the interest in and ability to deal with many other important issue. So, ang kanilang pagtugon sa isang issue ay maaaring makaapekto sa interes at sa kakayahing harapin ang marami pang mahahalagang issue. The nature of the focus and indeed the very creation of an INGO may be function of its ability to attract attention and to raise funds. As the result, other worthy, if not more worthy issue, example, soil erosion, especially in Africa, may fail to attract much, if any, attention and interest. In some cases, well-meaning INGOs conflict with one another, such as those wishing to ascertain practices. Example, logging versus those that see those practices as solution. Example, logging, producing wood as sustainable resource that is preferable to fossil fuels. The North control over INGO has actually increased, leading to question about the relevance to the concerns of the South. However, perhaps the strongest criticism of INGOs is that they seem to have helped accelerate further state withdrawal from social provision. In that sense, they can be seen as neoliberalism, Trojan horses, furthering its agenda while seeming to operate against some of its worst abuses. So, ang pinaka napupuna sa INGO ay ang kanilang pagtulong na mapabilis ang pag-alis ng Estado mula sa panlipunang probisyon. So, dahil doon sila ay makikita bilang isang neoliberalismo. Now, let's talk about intergovernmental organization or IGOs. Are organizations such as the UN that are internationally in scope. INGOs stand to gain from such formal association in various ways. They are symbolic gains such as greater legitimacy associated with being involved with such an internationally visible organization. There are also the more material gains since such an organization might provide badly needed funding to various INGOs. So mayroon ding mas maraming material na pakinabang ang organisasyon na ito dahil sila ay maaaring magbigay ng masamang kailangan na pondo sa iba't ibang INGO. Work may even be subcontracted to INGOs and they can earn income for performing the required tasks. Now, let's move on to the last part of our discussion, which is dangers to INGOs. First, they can easily become co-opted by the IGO involved. Less extremely, INGOs may need to become more rationalized, bureaucratized, and professionalized in order to deal with the needs and demands of the IGO. This in turn can lead to a more subtle change of orientation and a decline in radicalism in an INGO. So, maaaring kailangan ng mga INGO na maging mas makatwiran at professional upang matugunan ang pangangailangan na hinihingi ng IGO. At ito naman ay maaaring humantong sa isang mas banayad na pagbabago ng oryentasyon at pagbaba ng radikalismo sa isang INGO. Other possible change in INGOs include a loss of flexibility. As the result, as they must satisfy the demands of the IGO, which after all may well be the source of badly needed funds. A decline in capacity to act quickly and perhaps most troubling, a loss of autonomy and perhaps even identity. So kasama sa iba pang posibleng pagbabago sa mga INGO ang pagkawala ng flexibility. Dahil dapat matugunan ng mga ito ang hinihingi ng IGO na kung tutuusin ay maaaring pagmulan ng kailangan na pondo. Ang kanilang pagbaba sa kapasidad na kumilos ng mabilis ay magdudulot ng pagkawalan ng autonomiya at maging ang kanilang pagkakakilanlan. For their part, IGOs are affected by the involvement of INGOs. They too can gain symbolically and increase their legitimacy through the involvement of high-minded INGOs. Further, they can gain in material sense because of the fact that less bureaucratized INGOs can perform tasks that would be much more costly and done much more slowly and inefficient where they performed by IGOs. Sa kanilang bahagi, ang mga IGO ay apektado sa paglahok ng mga INGO. INGO may also share a symbiotic relation with intergovernmental organization, which while being beneficial in symbolic material terms, create challenges for the INGOs in terms of loss of radicalism and autonomy. Ang mga INGO ay maaari ding magbahagi ng symbiotic na relasyon sa mga IGOs, na kahit na ang material na pakinabang ay lumilikha ng mga hamon para sa mga INGOs sa pagkawala ng kanilang radikalismo at autonomiya. So, that will be the end of our discussion for Chapter 5, The Contemporary Global Governance. We hope that you learned something on our lesson for today. So, thank you for listening.